electronic password, I will be voting for Boris because I think he will do the things I care about: Europe, environment, peace in our time, and net zero.
Yet Boris Johnson is yet to face scrutiny from the Commons Privileges Committee on so-called Partygate. In an exclusive interview with GB News, the former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, said he thinks due process and fairness is incredibly important.
Pulled no brief for Boris Johnson, whom I thought was an absolutely appalling Prime Minister. But I think the question of the procedural propriety of that process is absolutely critical. It should be front and centre stage. And I would say that whether it was Boris Johnson being investigated or anybody else.
Well, the former Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab has told GB News he thinks Mr Sunak is the best person for the job.
I think he is, both on economic but also on those critical issues of public trust, the best place to get the government and fundamentally the country moving forward. The trust that the public have in the leader matters, and that's why I think Rishi is best placed to deliver in the national interest.
Well, in news away from politics, a planned bus strike by hundreds of workers has been stopped today following a new pay offer. Around 600 members of the Unite union at Arriva in Kent were set to walk out for 5 days from Monday. If the new pay offer is rejected, strike action will resume on the 28th of October. And 68 courts across England and Wales were affected by striking staff today. Legal advisers and court associates, who are members of the Public and Commercial Services Union, will walk out for 9 days in total. The workers are locked in a dispute over a management system which their employer says is key to modernising the court process. And Avanti West Coast managers are also striking today in the 4th day of walkouts for the train company this month. The RMT union says the timetable and operating hours have been significantly reduced today, with just 1 train an hour running from London to Manchester, Glasgow and Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned across all other rail companies at the start of next month. International news: Iran has condemned a UN probe into allegations its country's drones are being used for Russia to attack Ukraine. France, Germany and Britain called for the UN to investigate the Kremlin's use of alleged Iranian-made drones. It follows claims from US intelligence that Iranian military trainers were in Crimea helping Russian forces operate drones to attack targets in Ukraine. And a yellow weather warning is in place for most of England and parts of Wales for this weekend. Brace yourselves for heavy thunder, heavy rain and flooding. The thunderstorm warning is going to last between 4 a.m. tomorrow and 5 a.m. Monday. Forecasters warning the wet weather could lead to flooding, leaving businesses at home and homes at risk of damages. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. More news at the top of the hour. Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather mixed as heavy and thundery bands of rain push north right across the country. Let's home in on the detail. So a rather cloudy start to Sunday morning across northern Scotland, with some low cloud and also patchy rain in places. Temperatures starting the day on a mild note as a result. It's a cloudy morning too for Northern Ireland, with some patchy rain or drizzle in places. Any brighter breaks will be reserved for the east coast. A dry start across northern England for those in Purley too. However, outbreaks of heavy and thundery rain will quickly move in from the south. And turning increasingly wet across North Wales and the Liverpool Bay area as thundery rain moves northwards. Difficult travelling conditions as well expected as the winds start to pick up. Temperatures around 14 degrees Celsius. And thunderstorms to greet the Midlands early on Sunday morning. Heavy downpours leading to some localised flooding across the area first thing in the morning. Temperatures will start on the mild side though, once more at around 14 Celsius. A cloudy start to Sunday morning across much of East Anglia. However, those thunderstorms and heavy downpours will soon move in from the south. Temperatures beginning the day at around 15 Celsius. A very settled morning across southern England too. Heavy showers and thunderstorms once again.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Welcome to Headliners Best of the Week. This is your chance to catch up on some of the most significant news stories of the last 7 days and hear what our comedian panellists had to say about them.
On to Monday's Sun, and Sleepy Joe has woken up in a bit of a mood from his most recent nap, Steve.
Yeah, this is what Scott was talking about. He's passed some comment on Liz Truss, saying that Liz Truss's economic plan was a predictable mistake. I mean, it's difficult to argue that it wasn't predictable, because we could run the clips of Rishi Sunak saying, oh, I'll tell you what happens if Liz gets in, word for word, getting him right. So it's definitely predictable. Also, was it a mistake? Well, I mean, in the quote, he says that he wasn't the only one who thought the Prime Minister had blundered. I mean, surely even she does. Firing your Chancellor isn't a sign of thinking, I am getting this word perfect. But the article in The Sun calls him meddling. It's one of those where they drop in the words just because he's saying a thing they don't like. Because down the actual quote is from Joe Biden, I think the idea of cutting taxes to the super wealthy at a time when, anyway, I just think I disagree with the policy, but that's up to Great Britain to make that judgment, not me.
It's very succinct.
But RPMs have said the same kind of things about gun policy after a shooting, and the newspapers wouldn't call them meddling. Because look, that bit, it's up to Great Britain, their judgment, not me. It's not really meddling. It's just passing a comment that everyone seems to agree with.
Again, I think it's just very rare for any American politician to comment on policies in a country other than their own. It's really unusual.
So why do you think he did it?
I think that he's trying to re-establish what he thinks is a powerful relationship with the UK, but I also think that he wants to be in charge of what's going on here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's made it really clear that he wants American business to move more into the EU, and he wants expansionist economic policies, which I think a lot of Americans support.
I think he wants you back under his wing.
Oh,
I think that's what it's all about.
That's a sweet idea, isn't it?
Back under.
He fell off his bike, though. I don't want to hold on to Daddy. He's going to hurt my bones.
I mean, there's an argument that he's being a little bit of a hypocrite because the tax rates in the UK, to get this 45% tax rate, you've got to earn £50,000. That's a lot of money. But in America, it's 37%, and you have to earn £500,000 to get to that rate. So for him to sort of turn around and start talking about our taxes when they've got ridiculously low taxes.
He may be prepping for the UK, too, because the interest rates in this country are about to grow to about 6%, which they will be in the US in about a month and a half. I think they're going to match one another. And we've been warned by Hunt already that that's in the making. So I think he's just kind of laying the ground for that, too. He wants people to know that things are going to get difficult on both sides of the Atlantic, maybe.
Yeah, well, I've used up all of my intellectual powers.
So we're going to kick off with Tuesday's Telegraph, and of course it looks like the country has a new leader, and it's no longer Liz Truss.
Yes, Jeremy Hunt, now de facto Prime Minister, says senior Tory, which is Sir Roger Gale, but Wikipedia are also saying it. I went to Wikipedia and they'd already corrected it to Jeremy Hunt is now the de facto Prime Minister. So this seems to have happened. And I like to call him the Right Honourable Member for Beijing. I've coined that because he loves China. But this is who we've got now. And, of course, he's reversed almost all of the mini-budget. So Liz Truss finds herself in the impossible position of having a Chancellor who's against her Chancellor in just about every way. Now they say de facto running the country. And people have even messaged senior journalists like Christopher Hope at The Telegraph saying things like Rishi PM, Hunt Chancellor, Penny Foreign Secretary. They're trying to do a sort of coup. But don't worry, Penny Mordaunt has assured us it's not a coup. So that's when you know it probably is a coup.
Well, if the people at the heart of the potential coup are saying it's not a coup, they're just being smart, aren't they? I think that's what's going on there. Josh, can I ask you about this? I mean, surely, given that Liz Truss campaigned for the leadership on the basis of tax cuts to stimulate economic growth, and the person that she's now appointed as Chancellor opposes all of that, and not just opposes it, but has actually sliced up all of the plans. I mean, that's not sustainable, is it, for her as a leader?
No, it's not looking particularly good for her. Although I'd say this article is more of a placeholder article before we actually get to some action happening in the future. Basically, essentially, it's an MP going, now number 11 has a lot of power, which number 11 has always had a lot of power. That's why Gordon Brown took the job many years ago.
Well, it does have power, but they're surely answerable to the PM. But not in this case. I mean, it feels very much like, as the article points out, he's taken the job on his terms. He's basically said, look, I will take this job, but I have to be able to do whatever I want. Because there's no way
we don't know what happened actually behind the scenes, but I think she's basically said, do what it takes to fix it, and this is what it takes to fix it.
Is this what it takes to fix it, Nick?
Well, that's to be seen, depending on if it stabilises the markets or not. It's being characterised as like Truss has this, terrible Thatcherite, chaotic, kamikaze budget, and now it's going the other way. But it's not quite that clear because actually they've changed the energy price cap and made it so it possibly be worse for poor people because actually Truss had a 2-year plan for that, and now Hunt's changed it to it's going to be reviewed in April. We can get into all that later, into the details. The part that really bothers me is just the cavalier treatment of the members. I mean, we have this thing about they're trying to put Rishi back in, and we have people like William Hague saying they shouldn't go to the members, Tobias Ellwood agreeing. I even saw an anonymous Tory source in the paper say we should only go to the members when we're in opposition and it doesn't really matter.
But don't you think that's really to do with the fact that the country is not going to stand another protracted leadership
I mean, I totally agree
campaign?
with you. They shouldn't go to the members. They should go to...
Keir Starmer.
Which would be
a general election.
They should go to the public.
I'm saying they should go to the members just for the record.
You think they should go to the members?
Yeah, they should go to the members, but all the politicians are saying they shouldn't anymore.
I think they should go to the members of this country.
But imagine bringing back Rishi Sunak. I mean, he's been specifically rejected by the members.
I know. Well, I think Josh's idea of calling a general election, let's face it, that's not going to happen. Look at the way that the polls are, absolutely
It started with getting rid of Boris. There's no way to patch up. Once you get rid of Boris, which is essentially a coup, no one quite... Yes, there was a Partygate, but that was the mistake.
Yeah, who cares about those things,
they were
breaking the law?
As Nadine Dorries pointed out, quite fairly, they were 5 points behind at that time. Now they're facing total wipeout. Has it been an improvement? It's been a complete disaster.
Are either of you troubled by this idea that the markets seem to dominate absolutely everything? All of this is about reassuring the markets, right? Does that trouble you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, the blob it's the blob against Truss, isn't it? I do accept the criticism that they didn't lay out the budget clearly enough. It wasn't scrutinised properly. It wasn't planned properly.
Yes.
Because if you actually look at what they did, it's not that radical when you really break it down, but they failed to explain it properly.
And we're going to kick off with the news that's obviously dominating all of today's press. Leo.
Liz Truss is quit after 44 days at number 10. So there's now going to be a shortened leadership race. So previously they had this 8-week leadership race that sort of scuppered the Tory party because they're like a headless chicken. There's all these crises going on with Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis. Nobody was in charge. Boris, departed, and then they were all fighting it out and pulling each other down for 8 weeks. So the next leadership race is just going to be a week, and Boris Johnson has made a comeback. I don't know if they're going to make it like when JR was shot and then they pretended it was a dream. I don't know. They can maybe do that with Boris.
Well,
coming back.
it's got all the qualities of a soap opera. A lot of this, to be honest. So they could do a twist like that.
Yeah.
But there we see on the front cover of the Guardian that image of Liz Truss, and the bitter end. I mean, Josh, it really is. Do you know what? I feel sorry for her.
You know what? I was just warming to her.
You barely had time.
Such terrible timing.
Yeah.
But so she called up the king. She said, I call the king. And I wonder, if he's like, yeah, I'm kind of guessing why you're calling. I was just calling for a chat.
Yeah, but
I think he probably called.
We all knew. I mean, we all knew this was inevitable. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. No. I thought it might be at least a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because didn't you say the other day, I'm not a quitter, I'm a fighter?
The other day being yesterday.
Okay. I see.
But now supposedly Boris Johnson says here and Rishi Sunak are going to battle for the soul of the party. I didn't know the Tory party had a soul.
Well, that's because you're left-wing and you'll believe everything you hear on Channel 4 News.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? I mean, Leo, you mentioned this 1 week. I mean, of course, it has to be much shorter than last time.
Yeah.
Because it was interminable.
Yeah.
And there's no way that the electorate would tolerate those endless debates. And this time, they're saying it's going to be within a week, right? So by October the 28th, they're going to put the ballot way up. So what they have to get, the benchmark, I think, is 100.
Basically, they're making sure that the members don't pick the leader next time. So they're going to make sure that MPs... So you've got to get 100 nominations. They reckon it's going to be about 100 nominations.
Could be 3 people then.
So, two or three, or possibly even one. They were talking about possibly just one person, Rishi Sunak, being on the ballot, which isn't really much. But that's the sort of election you get in Zimbabwe or Russia.
He might even lose, even then.
The state of the Tory party.
Who knows?
He could. But, I mean, it does raise questions about democracy in this country because, Boris Johnson was elected in 2019 with, a huge majority, 80-seat majority, by the electorate. And he was deposed by this sort of shadowy cabal of Tory bigwigs.
He'd done some stuff.
He'd done some stuff, but what politician doesn't? And then Liz Truss was elected in this transparent and open election process, and then 40 days in, she gets deposed by the same shadowy cabal.
And we'll start with the front page of the Daily Mail. And Steve N. Allen, is Boris back?
It could well be. And not only back, the dream team, because technically nightmares are dreams. Could Boris and Rishi now unite to save the Tories? You know, like when every so often you get Magneto and Professor X have to team up to fight some other mutants. It's that kind of mashup, you know, when plot lines get really desperate. And I was speaking with someone earlier today who was saying the thing about Boris being, the new Boris Johnson possibly being the PM again, is that it does answer the question of, oh, but you have no mandate. We need another general election. No one voted for you. I suppose that solves it. He's proven that he can win elections. He's also proven that he acts in a way that means he has to resign as Prime Minister. Very few people have been Prime Minister, but fewer people have had to resign as Prime Minister. So he's in that very small, select bunch of people I'm not necessarily sure you want to be back in. But instead of the battle between the two ones, the Rishi and Boris, if they team up in some way, then maybe that solves this problem. Although I was watching the TV earlier on, and you were on it. And you were talking about the numbers that Rishi's already got. Do you know, if he's ahead number-wise, why would he compromise in a way that gives him the subordinate position? So maybe it won't turn out this way.
The thinking is, and you're right to raise that point, because you know he's already played second fiddle to Boris Johnson once already. Of course, stood down as Chancellor in Boris Johnson's administration. But the thinking is that if Boris gets 100 Tory MPs, and if Rishi does, then when those two names go to the membership, it's Boris all the way. So this is the concern for Rishi Sunak, is if Boris hits the threshold, at that point Sunak probably has to do a deal to save his political career.
Yeah, because it's not as if the numbers are going to change. You know, these people have already been sampled once, and we now know what they think about Rishi Sunak. But it would feel like maybe it's worth a roll of the dice just to see, because you're right, he'd be going back to exactly the same position. Not like he could ever then use that as a position to mature to Prime Minister ever again. So why not roll the dice and see whether you actually win?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? That's a tantalising question. Nick Dixon, this is a sliding doors moment for the Tory party. Sunak or Boris Johnson, it's the ultimate yellow brick road, isn't it?
Yeah, to me it has to be Boris, Mark, because, and not to be mistaken for what I would ultimately want in a dream world, by the way, because people reply to me on Twitter and say, what's wrong with you? You know, I would like a new party that I lead, but in the real world, Boris is the only option, because I think they had no moral right to get rid of him in the first place, because the people voted for him. And then they did this coup. It was the Rishi coup. The members rejected it. As you say, they voted for basically anyone but Rishi. They would have liked Kemi, I'm sure, but they were given Liz Truss, and they said, fine, not Rishi. So now, the only thing they can do to save themselves, potentially, I say potentially because they'll still probably lose, but to avoid a complete wipeout of the election, I think, is to bring back Boris. I think it has to be. And he's apparently reached out to Sunak. Last I heard, Sunak hadn't replied, so he may be less up for it. But to me, that's their only option. The only downside is that Boris could be investigated and lose a by-election. So there is that, which is pretty significant. But I think that's what they have to do. And I would actually add a caveat. I would say they've got Boris in a more weakened position now. He's desperate to come back, I imagine. Tell him no carry anywhere near number 10 and shake on that. And I think he'd go for it.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Scottish police seem to be very good at arresting women for fighting for their biological rights, but not so good at protecting Muslim scholars, Steve.
You can crowbar that in on any story, can't you?
I've got a skill. I've got a gift.
So this Muslim scholar in Scotland claims to be living under fatwa, says the police have failed to investigate, and says that's because they are worried about being accused of Islamophobia. It's also worth thinking about maybe they're just not good at their jobs. Before we throw around the I word, maybe they're just not good at investigating.
I think that's a much better accusation.
Yeah, either way.
They genuinely, I think, would at the moment rather be accused of being rubbish at their jobs than being Islamophobic. That's the state that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, because at least they could just blame that on, funding.
Oh, yeah, I'm just really bad.
But yeah, they were charged with investigating whether this fatwa was still in place. Kind of seems important to know. You'd want to know rather than just, well, let's...
I want to see if you can go down the shops, if you go to the water world.
I guess I'll find out. I'll pop down the shop, yeah. So has the investigation didn't really find much. I mean, yeah, the Muslim cleric also angered clerics by publishing texts that were perceived to be disparaging of the Prophet Muhammad. It's that old chestnut again. I know we would probably end up disagreeing as the sciencey atheist that I am. I see religion as playing problematic roles in certain places, and this is one of those, isn't it? Look at that, you can't say a thing without being sentenced to death.
If you care about what other people are saying about your particular thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference, I think. But, Scott, I mean, the police, I read the article, they actually consulted in the end the Islamic community for their advice, rather than kind of seemingly going in and saying, is this going on, is this not? I mean, their advice would be nice, you know. What about asking, hello, have you got a fatwa on this guy?
But if there is a fatwa on him, of course, these mosques are going to deny it. So I don't see the point of sending the police in at all. This guy needs to get a James Bond-type character in there. He needs a spy or somebody to infiltrate these mosques and find out how much danger he's actually in. The thing I'm thinking is, maybe he's not in any danger. Maybe he's made the fatwa up. Maybe he's just trying to sell books or hand out pamphlets, or he wants a new wife. I don't know. Maybe he wants a better house. Maybe he thinks, you know, they can move him somewhere that's pretty.
Maybe he's going to sue GB News.
Tuesday's Telegraph now, and Just Stop Oil back in the news again after they'd thrown a tin of tomato soup over Van Gogh the other day. What are they up to now? They're so unpredictable, Nick.
Yeah, Just Stop Oil protesters forced Dartford Crossing to close after scaling bridge. So a couple of them have gone up a bridge. 33-year-old London teacher Marcus and Morgan Trolan, 39-year-old bridge engineer. So it's very strange. We've seen. Did you see that video the other day of the van driver saying, like, do you know, we make your avocados, you know, do you understand how all this works? And he was saying, why are you attacking your own community? And he was trying to get them out of the road. That's what really bothers me about it. He was saying, go to Shell or BP. And there was that one the other day where a baby was stopped from going to hospital. But because they believe so strongly, they're so brainwashed by this ideology, they probably think, yeah, well, we're in it for the greater good. So that's what's so disturbing. I particularly find the older people quite disturbing. You expect young people to be a bit narcissistic and stupid, but you see the older people in this, like this guy who was throwing soup at something the other day, you think, why are you doing this?
Why are they so obsessed with soup? I mean, it's always soup.
Yeah, I know.
Throwing it everywhere.
There's some sort of point about also, the price of a can of soup or something.
How they contradict themselves, and I don't think that it's that they're so brainwashed by the ideology of climate change. It's just the methods are so ridiculous. So that thing where they're throwing soup, that is to illustrate that countless families in England cannot afford a tin of soup. Well, that doesn't illustrate. All you're doing is wasting more food there, and also that famine is rife across sub-Saharan Africa. So it's like, that's like, pointing out a famine by having a big feast or something.
Yeah, exactly,
like,
by
we're
wasting food.
By wasting it.
But also
they contradict themselves.
This thing about, going up this Dartford Bridge and sort of basically...
3:50 in the morning. I kind of respect anybody for getting up that early.
Well, there's commitment, certainly, but there's also just ruining people's day. Like, there's all sorts of people who won't be able to travel as a result of this. I mean, just in terms of peaceful protest, which I'm all for, when you do something that is disrupting other people's lives, it's not good for your own cause. I just don't see how that works.
Absolutely, and the irony is, of course, that this caused massive traffic jams.
Yes.
Pollution. Much more pollution, standing pollution, as the people are waiting for at least an extra 60 minutes, plus the detour that going around, people travelling longer.
Yes.
They hurt their own cause, and that is what is so stupid.
So, kicking off this section is a story in Wednesday's Independent about Kanye West, and I hope he has a spare $250 million laying around, Leo.
Yeah, so the mother of George Floyd's daughter, so Kanye West's baby mama, I think is the terminology.
George Floyd's?
George Floyd.
Baby mama.
Ex-wife.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so...
Sorry, not
George,
Kanye West.
Not Kanye West,
yeah.
no.
All right. That would be a love triangle that would have emerged by now.
Yeah, well, that might be why. She's suing Kanye West for $250 million.
Yeah.
Kanye
That's
West,
opening the bidding, I would imagine, isn't it? But,
she's not going to get that. So basically, Kanye West claimed that the police officer's knee wasn't even on his neck like that. That's a quote from him, and implied that he died from fentanyl poisoning instead of suffocation. We saw the video. He had George Floyd had a police officer kneel on his neck
for 9 minutes.
For 9 minutes, and saying he couldn't breathe. So it looks pretty open and shut. However, the coroner's report did say that he had toxic levels of fentanyl in his body.
Who doesn't?
Methamphetamine. Well, yeah, with China flooding the
Been to
West.
the dentist lately?
With it, so the heart disease and fentanyl use were contributing factors to his death, according to the.
I mean, I would assume, I didn't hear the full interview, but I assume this is in the context of somebody saying to him, "Why are you wearing a White Lives Matter T-shirt?" Right? This was last week. He was wearing that sheet shirt. And they're probably talking about Black Lives Matter, and is it a genuine cause, or is it like to some extent a cooked-up charge?
Kanye West has been on a mission recently to say as many controversial things as he can in a short space of time. It's almost like the Crystal Maze when they grab the golden tickets.
Kanye West. It's like it's a dare. There's a whole name.
They'd also asked him on a podcast about Candace Owens' documentary. Have you heard about that documentary?
Go on.
It's called The Greatest Lie Ever Sold, George Floyd and the Rise of BLM. So he's talking about this woman who's written this... and so he was commenting on, I think he probably agrees with that the platform she's speaking from, which is that BLM is unnecessary, and that the George Floyd's death was not...
typical?
It was going to happen anyway.
Yeah, right. But it wasn't... I mean, I suppose the extent... I mean, it did go around the world, obviously, and we discussed it a lot, that some of the protests... Although it's funny how memory plays tricks with you. We can't have been discussing it because this show is only a year older. It was 2 years ago, wasn't it? But
it's
I feel like we were here talking about it.
It's been an issue since it happened.
Yeah.
It's not like we talked about earlier, it's not the first time that a police officer has killed someone unnecessarily. In the US, it happens all the time.
Although what's interesting is it doesn't happen all the time. So people think, the average amount of times people think it happens is 10,000 times.
I know,
It's mental.
It's about a dozen times a year, isn't
12
it?
times a year, which, I mean, obviously each one of those is a tragedy and is awful, but I mean, 12 times
and
in
even
a country
those
of
unarmed black men killed roughly a dozen times a year on average. And even among those, several of them are killed by black officers. Quite a few are killed by female officers. In fact, it seems like in terms of correlation, you're slightly more likely to be killed by a female officer if she thinks she might have a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, the image of like a kind of redneck white cop killing an unarmed black guy, that really isn't even typical within...
It's a fantasy fabricated by the media.
But it's the smartphone video footage, isn't it, which has changed the conversation, because suddenly, it's just repeated. It's like there's a brutal footage of Kennedy assassination or something, it just gets burnt into
it's also
the head.
the racism that treads itself pretty powerfully through America.
Well, that is arguably true. We may be coming on to that shortly.
What's interesting is Kanye West is previously, he donated $2 million to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, he's a big fan.
He paid for the daughter's college tuition.
Yeah.
So now the daughter, or the daughter's mother, is suing for $250.
She's qualified as a lawyer and she's coming for him.
It might be sociopathy. It might be that
unpunished.
he just wants to be on the front page. It might just be that.
It might be him.
Just
Let's
celebrity.
see.
Even when the cameras have stopped rolling, you really do need to be careful what you say with a mic on, Leo, and I'm saying that to you specifically.
Yeah.
No, the way you speak when you're off air.
On air is the problem.
On air is the problem with Leo.
Although I do sometimes stop speaking, Josh. But Tory MP Steve Baker hopes Krishnan Guru Murthy is sacked and says it would be a service to the public as Channel 4 suspends the presenter for a week after calling the minister a C word.
Just leave it at that.
See you next Tuesday. Off camera. I think you say see you next Tuesday. They apparently breached the Channel 4 Code of Conduct, which is to keep your biases, your left-wing bias, hidden. And so he revealed it. He revealed it, and
but sorry, I have to ask, Leo, because no one was in any doubt really that of Channel 4 News' bias. I mean, that would be hilarious. That's like pretending that the Guardian doesn't have a bias.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so you remember when they did the coverage of the last election? I mean, it was so partisan.
Yeah.
So this is no big secret, is it? I think isn't it just the language that's the problem, Josh?
All right, can I say something? This is the Howie hot take, right?
Okay.
It's got nothing to do with bias. He didn't precase it with Tory CEO, whatever like that.
Yeah.
He basically, they had an argument. This guy called him, basically said he was a stupid question. And what he did, first of all, number one, he invented off air, right? That's the big thing.
Yes.
Number two is, it's a great word. Love it. One of my favourite words. And number three is, they had an argument and he said, where he basically said, he accused him of being stupid or said it was a stupid question. And afterwards, he then went, no, it wasn't a stupid question. Oh, God, he's such a whatever.
Well, actually, we can hear the recording. We have bleeped it, by the way, but let's hear what we've got.
Steve Baker, thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot, Steve. It wasn't a stupid question, Steve. You know it. I'm very happy to go up against you on trust any day. What a
I mean, it sounds almost like, from that, it sounds like it was banter, almost.
Well, it sounds like he's actually talking to him when he says it. It's not like he's turned away and is just saying it to his,
Steve! Steve, one last thing.
Yeah.
But that didn't go out live, did it? It just went out on the feeds, which is
But it went out on the feeds, which means that other people are going to pick it up. And Josh, isn't it the case, though, that, I mean, broadcasters, always have to be aware that they're wearing microphones, they have to be professional.
Yeah.
And really, when you're a news broadcaster, you really do want to keep your...
Absolutely, but but the point is, this has been presented as a narrative of like, look at him, he's a big lefty. Now, he may well be, right? But this isn't it's not like the usual diatribe by some lefty, oh, Tories, I hate Tories and all that stuff. This is him, this is a personal...
It's a bit worse than that.
But it's a personal thing about the way that their conversation...
So for you, it's not really... The language, the extremity of the language in and of itself is not sufficient, you don't think, to be said?
OK, but that's the argument, what it should be. What people are trying to make it...
Leo Curtis.
Some people who were on the TV before are trying to make it all about bias.
Saturday's Telegraph now, and interesting advice from a group of lawyers, Nick.
Well, this comes from Sir Geoffrey Voss, a senior judge, and he says that white male lawyers should think twice before talking about sport at work to avoid excluding women. Thus, in one brilliant sentence, being sexist and racist at the same time. He's saying women don't understand sport and white men are bad. So that was quite brilliant. Actually, he was sexist on two levels because he's having to go at white men and he's saying women don't understand sport.
Let me guess, he's a white man as well.
Well, I haven't even checked, but it's so obviously true, definite, isn't it? And he also says they shouldn't talk about elite universities. And then he goes on to say that this will alienate women and ethnic minority lawyers. It's like, you're not quite the legend. You think you've stepped in about 5 different faux pas there. I mean, ridiculous. We don't need this kind of nonsense advice. It's amazing how open people are about just saying white as a pejorative while thinking they're doing something good, which they're clearly not.
But don't worry, he managed to get all 4, because the full quote is saying that these conversations can exclude women and ethnic minorities. Oh, yeah, there's no links between ethnic minorities and sport. Surely they barely ever play. But it's bizarre it is obviously terrible. It's wrong to presume that women don't like sport and to patronise them as if, oh, you're a woman, you couldn't possibly tell someone I'm not interested in this conversation on your own. However, having said all of this, I'd love it if people shut up about sport, because I don't like it. So it'd be nice if there was a
white
rule
noise.
against it.
White noise for you when people talk about the Premier League and things like that.
And the year that a team did a thing.
But I also get uncomfortable when you talk about your elite schools, Steve, which is something he says here as well.
Here's the thought.
I know we both went to Cambridge.
Who cares if any groups are excluded from certain topics in a conversation? I know nothing about cricket, so if it's raised in the office, then they lose me. So be it. I'll just go and make a cup of tea. Why have we got to include everyone on everything?
Well, I don't think we necessarily have. I think you're presuming we should listen to this judge. Oh, an old judge who's slightly out of touch.
But that sentiment feels common in many of our institutions these days.
But find someone who's actually fired for talking about... you mentioned football in the office. Nah.
It's a good point.
People aren't incapable of saying I'm...
I know what you mean, but I'll never forget the time, and it was a couple of years ago, and I was at a gig, and a stand-up comedy gig, and the amplifier was not set correctly, so the sound was just ridiculous. And I could see you've got your treble, your bass, and the promoter was a female promoter and a good comedian. And so I said, I've done this to the amp so that it sounds better. And she accused me of mansplaining. And I just thought, well, no, I've just explained to you what I did with the amp, and it wasn't related to your gender. But don't you think that's where we are these
But you
days?
were a man at the time, Mark.
It's a good point.
Before the transition.
But also, how did you do it? Did you put your leg up on the amp and go, listen, darling?
I did, actually.
Yeah, that's probably why, yeah.
Correct.
But Mark, he says we have to be more inclusive. I think you're right, though. Inclusivity is a problem. Aren't things better when they're exclusive? Don't you? Who wants to join an inclusive club, right? Isn't exclusivity better than inclusivity?
No.
Why do you pay more for it? If it's like a club or first class or something, you wouldn't go to somebody and say, inclusive event. You want something that's exclusive, be honest.
No, I'm from the north. I ain't paying for first class anyway. No, I disagree with that. So if you follow your logic, and I'm hoping that was more of a joke than actually, no, we should only have conversations using terms that only people from a certain school know.
That's my position.
OK. Change. Change.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Scott, you may not be interested in the positions that she takes during her day job, but what do you think of this woman's political position? Whoa, got through that link.
Daily Star, will Daily Star's 60p Tesco lettuce or PM Liz Truss last longer?
Oh,
sorry.
This is not. This is about the.
This one.
Yeah.
Oh, Mia Khalifa.
Yeah.
I thought you were skipping it.
You're a big
Sorry.
fan of hers.
No, is she a porn star?
Is she? Come on, like you're not. You don't have that on your homepage.
I don't watch. I don't have to. I just said I'm married to a Brazilian, and. But yeah, Mia Khalifa fumes over crimes against humanity after Iran, quote-unquote, hellhole prison riot. She's an ex-Pornhub star. What's Pornhub? Mia Khalifa has shown support for the Iranian political protesters locked up in the notorious Evin prison after a major fire and riot broke out last night. She's saying, you guys, it's mean. This is really rough, you guys. Come on, don't be so mean.
You're watching a different clip.
She said support. She said support those guys. It's a crime against humanity that you're hurting them and burning them and blowing them up. I'm glad she's become aware of it now. Lebanese-American OnlyFans model Mia shared footage on Twitter that appeared to show Iranians blocking the roads to the prison, thus preventing security forces from quelling the uprising.
Well, I think this is genius because, of course, we know that comedy can be quite a good tool for getting across your message. And I don't feel like they've ever really utilised pornography in the same way. What do you think, Steve?
As much as I'm normally willing to do terrible jokes about all the stories, I do think there's a really awkward fit between how serious the story is that she's commenting on, and then the Daily Star goes, who can we get to comment on this story of uprising and civil unrest? Who's the woman from the website that we're all not allowed to look at work, so we use VPNs instead? It's a weird fit.
Is she hot?
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle, and I'm joined today by Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. This is the third and final part of Headliners today. We're going to start with the Scottish Daily Express with a story about something that happened here on GB News.
Yep, Graham Norton has betrayed me, says Father Ted writer Graham Linehan, as cancel culture row rumbles on. And as you say, Andrew, this was when he was talking to you at the Battle of Ideas. So some sort of weird hall of mirrors kind of inception.
My named in the article. Do I get a name?
You're named in the article, yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's important.
And this is interesting as well, and I'll name check myself as well, because I spoke to Graham on Saturday night after the Battle of Ideas, and I was actually saying to him, it's such a sad thing that this genius writer, who made these seminal comedy works like Father Ted, that was such a huge comedy when we were growing up, it was just massive, and then the IT Crowd and all those other ones, has been forced to fight this culture war, and in a normal world, he would just get to create and write brilliant things, but now he has to prove that women exist every day, which is pathetic, but I'm glad he's doing it. Now, this refers to Graham Norton saying that cancel culture was just accountability.
Yes.
This is related to another GB News story, because he said it in relation to John Cleese. And actually, some people have called him out for this. And Brendan O'Neill wrote an article about it. Mariella Frostrup shared it, because he then brought J.K. Rowling in, and it was sort of fudged that one as well. But people are actually pushing him back now. When people say, oh, there's consequences, which he also said, there's accountability, what they mean is we want free speech to be further curtailed, because free speech, as we understand it, already has certain restraints. Even the American First Amendment talks about fighting words being an exception. There are exceptions to free speech. This is why Michael Knowles, in his recent book, said, let's call it speech standards. Our conception of free speech already has various caveats. When people like Graham Norton and others, they may not even know they're doing this because they're a bit thick. When they say free speech has consequences, they mean I want to further curtail your freedoms past where they already are with our current understanding of free speech.
Well, I would want to know what he means by accountability. Accountability for what? What has Graham Linehan said that he wants him to be accountable for? What has John Cleese said that he wants him to be accountable for? Because he's not answering that question.
Well, yeah, exactly. He's saying they're not towing the line. They're not towing the narrative that trans women are women or whatever it is.
So in other words, they disagree with him?
Yeah, well, essentially, or with what we would know as the... I don't like saying woke movement, but
if he was talking about certain jokes that, say, these comedians had told years ago, and that you need to, you can't tell those jokes anymore, which I think he alluded to, but Graham Norton's told some pretty offensive jokes.
He was taking the mickey out of a Big Brother contestant back in the day, which was quite, no, no one's perfect. That's the point. I mean,
comedy.
Certainly, and that's sort of Obama's point. But, Nick, everything that Nick said is true, and a clever way of saying what I think it really comes down to is just a viciousness of these people and a need to get almost revenge or to punish those who don't think the way they think.
Something that Graham Linehan said to me in that interview is exactly what you were talking about, Nick, that he's, he isn't writing comedy at the moment. He can't. Not just because his mind is now in this other world, which he is obviously rightly feels is very, very important and needs to be addressed, but no one would commission him either.
Right, the Father Ted musical, isn't it?
The musical
to get made.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's shocking. And Graham Norton basically is signalling to the cathedral, or whatever you want to call it. He's got his BBC job. He's signalling to those people, hey, I've got all the correct views. But the interesting thing is there's a little bit more pushback on it, partly because of J.K. Rowling, who kind of exists on the fault line, because she's so obviously not a sort of right-wing or not, you know what I mean? People are starting to say, hang on, what have you said about J.K. Rowling? And he had that bizarre comment that her views were maybe problematic, but he may as well have her on his show because it wouldn't make any difference. But he sort of vaguely condemned her at the same time. It was really sort of pathetic.
But now he's deleted his Twitter account because there was pushback. And, of course, this follows a very predictable pattern. You see, when people criticise him for these points of view, well, I don't know. He hasn't said anything yet, but will the next step be playing the victim?
Well, exactly. Or people will play the victim on his behalf.
Well, they've already had hashtag I stand with Graham Norton.
Exactly.
You don't need to stand with him. He's fine.
And this is the difference here, is this isn't him being cancelled.
Right.
This is people challenging his view, not with rape threats and death threats like J.K. Rowling gets, who he didn't bother to defend in any way or to argue against those things. This is mostly left-wing women fighting for their biological rights.
So I've seen it today on Twitter, people saying, oh, you all go on about cancel culture, how evil cancel culture is, and here you are, you've bombarded Graham Norton with criticism and he's had to delete his Twitter account, so now he's been cancelled.
He didn't have to do anything.
It's a complete misunderstanding of the issues. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing, but we're not dealing with the brightest of people, number one. But to say that isn't a way to actually help move this forward. And I don't know...
What you just said isn't
no, it isn't at all. But at the same time, I'm just dealing with... When you're in the trenches on this stuff, like the bitterness and the vileness of these people. And I was saying to you, I spent like a weekend arguing with a bunch of comics defending Jacob. And just all I was saying was very calmly, they were going on about how she was like this transphobe and disgusting and all this stuff. And I was like, please just give me one quote that she has said that is transphobic. That's it.
Yes.
And then I'm just getting abused. People swearing at me, people sending me messages. No, of course not. And they were like, oh my God, you're sea lion. I'm like, no, I'm not. All I'm saying is there one quote? And they can never do it because, of course, there isn't a transphobic quote that she's come up with. And I'm literally fighting about 10 people at the same time, former friends. It's
Josh,
crazy.
The mistake you're making is arguing with comics. I think Nick and I have given up on that.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a while ago.
Well, I'm still in it, but
most of them have blocked me.
Yeah, me too.
So it's a moot point.
I'm perfectly happy with that. How does that saying go? People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. What's that about?
We've got another great artist that's been cancelled. Yeah. So there's a fugitive Italian rapper called Nico Pandetta.
Nico Pandetta!
I think I had one of them for dessert last night. So he's been arrested after his lyrics boasted he couldn't be caught. So he bragged about financing his first CD with money from a robbery. He sang songs about defiance of the law in this track, Pistol Nella Fendi.
Pistola Nella Fendi.
Which
I was worried that Josh would do his Italian accent. When Josh starts doing his accents, it's just terrible.
Monday, Tuesday, Saturday.
It's like Top of the Pops in the 70s. But so it became a summer anthem in Italy. Got 38 million views on YouTube, and he's the nephew of a jailed Sicilian mafia boss. And he sang, he's like, officer, you won't get us. And then he went on the run, and they did get him, and he's now he's been handed a 4-year sentence for drug dealing.
But could it not just be that these rap lyrics are artistic license, that they're not literally the truth?
Well, they're not literally the truth because he got caught. And he said
he did literally deal some drugs.
He did actually do
it. Which is how terrible the streaming business is at the moment. That you now have to. That's how little you get paid by Spotify.
You get more royalties.
You have to deal drugs.
More royalties from crack cocaine.
So he effectively confessed to his crime through the medium of rap.
Yeah.
And that's how he got caught. This reminds me, you know that novelist who wrote that book, How to Murder Your Husband? It was in the news recently. And then she murdered her husband. And her whole plan was in her book.
Yeah.
That's multitasking.
Is it a similar thing to that?
O.J. Simpson as well had that book that was called If I Did It, but the F was tiny. And it just said, I did it.
Well, this is the crossover between art and reality, I suppose. We're moving on to Friday's Telegraph now. And men are better than women at dieting. Yes?
Yes. It's official. In the Telegraph, men are better at dieting than women. But actually, so they've looked at a whole bunch of studies. But what they're showing is that women lose weight on pills, essentially. Like, if they're put on drugs, weight loss drugs, they lose more weight than men.
Most drugs are weight loss drugs.
OK, yeah, thank you. Let
him finish the story.
But they're saying that the reason why is because women are smaller, so if they're given, like, one pill and a guy's given one pill, that would have more effect on a female body. What they're saying...
So she'll still be dancing at 6 a.m.
Yeah. Thank you very much. But what they're saying when it comes to, like, normal dieting in terms of, like, eating less food, men lose more weight. And the reason they've given, and this is a very tenuous reason that they haven't proven at all, is because supposedly men are less likely to take part in weight trials. So I don't think that's not the reason at all. The reason is that men have greater willpower.
I don't think it's even that, Josh. I think men are more obsessive. And so when they start a task, they normally want to really
see
go
things
through
through.
it. Right, so there's that.
They don't get distracted like women do.
But isn't there also, just to tone down the misogyny here, isn't it also possible,
I was
Leo...
looking at Leo because I was hoping he would laugh and encourage me, but he hasn't.
Oh, I just thought you were being serious.
Oh.
Yeah?
Is it not the case,
I was
Leo?
enjoying it. I want to hear more from Josh.
No, I'm going to come to you. But is it not the case that men, because men have more muscle mass, it's easier to lose weight?
And I think
that's that simple?
Testosterone as well helps you burn fat. And women are, I don't want to be transphobic, so people with the cervix, they're sort of biologically more likely to store fat because they'll need it for reproduction.
Yeah. It's as simple as that, really. It's nothing to do with weight trials at all.
This one, it's a fascinating story. Saturday's Mirror. And I don't know about you, Steve, but I'm not opposed to being called naughty. I made a good living from it.
Many of your usernames include that, apparently. But this is about how you raise your kids. A subject close to my heart. I got this child, 7-month-old. I love that little...
Right, let's rephrase that. I have a child. I've got this child. Sounds like you've acquired the child somehow.
It's mine.
Got hold of this child.
As we were saying earlier, I love him dearly, which is weird. We've only known him for 7 months and we've not really talked.
But you have to look after Leo's child as well now, don't you?
Yeah, making the GB News creche.
Yeah.
It's the only way to make money in this business. You do get paid for childcare. However, this expert says that you shouldn't use the phrase naughty to a child and says it's as bad in terms of abuse as hitting the child. No, it's not. So that's the counter-argument to that. Because it's not, is it? Give me a choice between you hitting me or calling me naughty. Maybe do both, actually. But we know what you're like. The whole article then goes on, she's a cognitive behavioural therapist, and then says that even words like good could cause damage. Well, pick a lane. You can't call the kid naughty or good. Will you just sit in silence? How's he ever going to learn to speak?
Well, this is a very hands-off, sort of libertarian approach to parenting in which you just let the child be who they are.
Yeah.
And there also was there was a book out about parenting a few years ago, and it was written by a top psychologist, and she said, and we interviewed her on the radio, and she said that it's wrong to make a child say thank you for things.
I mean,
have manners at the table.
If you want to breed an absolute monster.
Yeah.
I mean, because this child will have to live in the real world. I've got a friend who their partner didn't like to use the word no around kids. It's such a negative thing. Yeah, but you're going to live in a world where the word no has meaning. And if you can't be told no as a child, you're going to have anger problems when you get told no and you're a 6'2", 25-year-old bloke, and then all of a sudden there's a bigger problem. You know, the world has to require some of these rules.
Yeah. What's going on, Nick?
Yeah, it's Rousseauian nonsense. The idea that we're just best completely free and we'd just all be perfect. Children need discipline, like you've said. Otherwise, they become monsters. I've got some kids live near me. And you never see their parents ever. They scream all day. This idea, the idea you can't even be good. She's saying here, so many adults feel the need to be good. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah. What do you want? Just total anarchy and chaos. It's like, I think you touched on it. It's like Jordan Peterson would say, like, it's a great way to make your child hated. Like, if your child will be hated because they won't be able to follow normal patterns of behaviour.
Your Jordan Peterson's very close to your Kermit.
Well, they always say that he's like Kermit.
All right. Then I think I can feel a sketch coming. I could write that for a different...
Is this also part of a movement that's undermining the rights of parents to raise their children as they see fit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should...
the attack on families, the attack on parents.
Absolutely. It's the attack on the family. It should be iron Victorian discipline, Mark.
No, because stuff's happening. I don't want to take us down the sort of trans rabbit hole, but in Scotland, for example, legislation has been drawn up that would allow children at primary school to choose their own pronouns and their own names, independent of the wishes of the parents. I just wonder, am I putting two and two together and coming up with
you're
four?
right.
Nearly made it a show without a trans issue. Honestly, I read through these stories going, oh, look at this, not 3 tonight, but you managed it. Of course you did.
Yeah, but do you not think we demonise parents slightly now?
Absolutely.
With
It's undermining the family, absolutely.
But the counter to your first point, like, is this taking away the rights of the parents? No, you can ignore this cognitive behavioural therapist. Like, I'm still in charge of, I will be saying no to my child because I want him to be a good person.
Yeah.
And I'll say he's good because he's pretty good. So just ignore advice if you don't like it. Don't cry about it.
Ignore advice. I like the sound of that.
Thank you for joining us for Headliners Best of the Week. Join us again at 11 o'clock tonight and every night to get the first look at tomorrow's top news stories. Bye for now.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather mixed as heavy and thundery bands of rain push north right across the country. Let's home in on the detail. So a rather cloudy start to Sunday morning across northern Scotland, with some low cloud and also patchy rain in places. Temperatures starting the day on a mild note as a result. It's a cloudy morning too for Northern Ireland, with some patchy rain or drizzle in places. Any brighter breaks will be reserved for the east coast. A dry start across northern England for those up early too. However, outbreaks of heavy and thundery rain will quickly move in from the south. And turning increasingly wet across North Wales and the Liverpool Bay area as thundery rain moves northwards. Difficult travelling conditions as well expected as the winds start to pick up. Temperatures around 14 degrees Celsius. And thunderstorms to greet the Midlands early on Sunday morning. Heavy downpours leading to some localised flooding across the area first thing in the morning. Temperatures will start on the mild side though, once more at around 14 Celsius. A cloudy start to Sunday morning across much of East Anglia. However, those thunderstorms and heavy downpours will soon move in from the south. Temperatures beginning the day at around 15 Celsius. A very settled morning across southern England too. Heavy showers and thunderstorms once again.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, why the Conservative Party's problem
is that they're not conservative anymore. As Joe Biden says he wants to return for another 4 years in the White House, is he dreaming? We'll get the views of the Queen of US showbiz royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. In the big question with declining birth rates, is not having children selfish? We'll debate that with Andrea Williams from Christian Concern.